Lama Chöpa, Yamle Jaya, Danganzuki, the Kowalia, Gejun Giwadi, the Sigura, Danganzupine, Maranzuki, Kovi, Netelia, and Chige, Dungai Rashin, Dungai, Dunga, Dunga, Chava, Dunga, and Dungai, Mato, and the Chiki Devasiati, Namdo Yomaris, Danganzuki, Chidin Piki Devasiati, Zigor, the Unity, Guru Dumare, Chojon, and Shavana, that they were Timbudi Mare, Nyapjons, Madiamare, tis not the Guru Duma Sigris, tis not the Nego Corvi, the Nega Ganga, Dunga Yobadi, Ganzo, Hamo, Chair, tis not that Dunga Imba, the Corvi, Dunga, the Nede, Imba, Nisu, the Winis, the Hamo, Chair, Nangazo Karayu, Tumors and Beji, Gayu Chanashin, Dina Telia, Donyaki, Dumboye. 미지코롱아 저기 체디기 디기 주야다 체디기 디삼기 디기 주야다 동화세 체디기다 저기 지된비기 지금 다 주소 자활이야 근데 지금 롱주시 되는 되고래서 지난디니 디자자다 체디자자 삼되긴 걸로 로디다 체디기 튕긴 주야 동화세 체디자 삼기 삼미 되냐기 듬바젠디 듬바디다 로디 달로너 주시에 스팅하서 방구고래서 제산디 방고 디간스 방그레스네다 라바스미 냠는 제야다 안에 밥에 넣어둔 냠는 제발에 방고래서 이렇게 생각해서 아디고 시야바래다 디네게 방바있네 디네게 코비 동아 찾아 방바 토요도 네 탈비께선 주고 탈바 토고래서 제산 디네 사디 디네레서 이렇게 생각해서 디고 드랑아마 디고 쉬바래
To review where we are now in the trainings of the stages of the path to attain enlightenment, the section we've just completed is an indispensable foundation for one to cultivate within oneself. It includes reflecting on the wide range of suffering experiences that are found throughout samsara. One here reflects in different ways at the realms and the experiences of beings in different realms of rebirth, as well as the different divisions of suffering into 8 and 6 and 3. The most common of which is that of threefold suffering: the suffering of physical and mental pain, the suffering of transient happiness, and all-pervasive suffering. Here, amongst these, the one that I've encouraged you to look at both in meditation and in your daily life is the suffering of transient happiness. Because it is striving for the transient pleasures of this life with the hope, the expectation that the attainment of such happiness will bring a lasting relief of suffering. This is a delusion. This is not in accordance with reality. But this misunderstanding keeps us striving for ever more pleasures and comforts and transitory pleasurable experiences. Whereas in reality, this is not the attainment of actual happiness, although that's what we call it, but rather a brief and temporary ending of one suffering by replacing it with another experience, which too ends in displeasure. This we need to recognize so that we can wake up from this misunderstanding and focus on the happiness we have yet to experience, the lasting stable happiness of liberation, and have that as the forefront of our mind, have that as the attainment of that as what occupies our mind, rather than the attainment of transitory pleasures. And having generated such a mind of definite emergence, one strives to achieve the goal of definite emergence, liberation from suffering, through what we looked at last week, the 7 riches of Aryas, namely faith, ethical restraint, hearing, generosity, shame and embarrassment, and wisdom. And what we looked at the week before, the 3 higher trainings of higher training in ethics, higher training in concentration, and higher training in wisdom. And these are these and the 3 high trainings and the 7 riches of Aryas, one trains in order to achieve liberation or freedom from suffering. Liberation from suffering, freedom from the afflictions.
Lama Chöpa, Lamalya, Lamada Idam, Jike, or Yemedu Devi Tone, Zuki, Dusine, and Jike, Lama Chojin Sat, Delia, and Chopa, Divasha, Valasoba, Yala, Yuko, Chopo, Chesavice, Ledang, and Yamnichia de Carrella Nada, Nambokoranda, Zuki, Givishin. Kusong tu sum yun den je, Gewe Xin Yin ju kusong tu yun den je, and go Gewe Xin Yin la, Deva Zichi to Jia, and Gewe Xin Yin Sosolia, and Che Dembateli, the Bema Sekirin Chimuyin, Sekirin Jayada, Denechene, and the Gewe Xin Comedi, then get Dambodi Yamnaje, Damborimba Tirua, and Digene, and around 다른 아주 된주 루틴 토와 빼 맞아 약보인 서 된주 루틴 톱가와래 제사되니게서 네 자치무들이 톱되바리 빼 맞아 약보인 선배게 가고면다 다디니 된주 루틴 델리아의 루틴 델리아 개와 강도 주야다 디바 보야디 배수 제기 선배게 다디니게 지긴 선배 삼다에 된 안쪽이다 두스치는 삼다 니베데 차고로와 다 숨바델라 가서 다 동아 다 지게 Dunga le Kyubike, Nason, Dungala, Sobatine, Dunga le Kyubi, Nubel Suyores, Gemno Conjusum Yores, just not a Gemno Conjusum Kyugri, Chibeta, Gemno Conjusum Sanjo Conjo, Kidum, which was somebody. That the naked Cubi, nobody, Gemno Conjusum Yores, Yishi Pechene, and it dead Gembrochea. The ne Gembroche Sevicella, and Chike, that Gembri Lapcha, Divon Kerupchea, and Azuke, Divasha, the Nimbo Topshiko, and Divasha, Lasopatu, some time at the Roa. And Dijela and Gariosanda, the Koigi, Dangazuke, Tajiga, Yawa, Dangasona, Lada, Mida, Leda, Numo, Omi Koala, Kichinjela, and Dunga, Dunga, Chaba Duju, Dunga, Rashin, Chanya, Resha Madon, Dewa said Namia, Minuchang around together, the Nigi Kovi, Nelakidine, and Chike. Sedizam yidigi juviata dichudens duyenpa sedigi duyenpa long jibe chane delia be chik imen geje mazu gayu chana jen da de dus digore dilade nurturisha denzada kowa dileji leda nyumu ongju kowa dilede matanda tabmin도 di tagudu sembege tabadoni shugeje komyada masa komyadira deje da di yanje di기부 충분다 징게 남기를 많이 하면 제가 돼가지고 다 그새 되들래시 다 주사버려.
Because we've been looking at this text for quite a while now, let's just take a moment to review the steps we've gone through. Tonight we'll be coming to the 89th verse. So it starts with the first section where one does a brief visualization and generates the required motivations in order to engage in a Mahayana practice, in particular those of bodhicitta and wisdom realizing emptiness. But here in this practice, in particular, one starts and then in the second section, it expands on the visualization and mental understanding of the Lama and Yidam and Buddha being indivisible in nature. And there's quite an elaborate visualization that is constructed. So those are the first two divisions of the text. Thereafter, one comes to utilize this opportunity in a greatly beneficial way, this opportunity now of being in the presence of one's Lama and Yidam and the Buddhas, or the lineage Lamas, all who one sees as indivisible in nature. One uses this opportunity to accumulate vast stores of merit as well as purify previously accumulated negativities. And there the text goes into the section, or the practice goes into the section of the 7 limb prayers, which are primarily purification as well as accumulation as well as purification. Then the text moves into the next section where the goal is to generate unwavering faith or trust, conviction in one's Lama. to do so, one recalls his incredible qualities and the kindness and benefit that is brought into one's life. And verse by verse by verse in that section, one is recalling these incredible qualities, kindnesses, and benefits he's brought to one's life, so as to generate unwavering faith. And faith there is utilized so that one can make deep, heartfelt supplications, not just a mere recitation of words, but from one's heart to someone that we recognize as being our guide to the state of lasting happiness. And this mind of faith is a mind of trust in his guidance, in his qualities, wisdom, love, compassion, and so forth. Therefore, recognizing those qualities, and one yearns for them oneself and requests the guidance so that we can develop qualities just like he has. Thereafter, we come to this section where, in a sense, he responds to those supplications. And he responds by laying out in detail, or in a brief glance meditation over many verses, the detailed steps of progression, sequential progression, to the attainment of enlightenment. So this is, in our text, I think it's called the Lama Prayer. And this is the section that we are in now. You could view it as being the culmination of the previous sections, because here, our Lama, who we recognize is indivisible in nature from all the Buddhas, as well as our Yidam, is now answering our heartfelt requests in the supplication section and giving us the spiritual instructions, the direct advice on how to become a Buddha. This starts first with relying on the teacher, thereafter into the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, where he guides us to recognize the incredible value of this life, so as to shake us from the stupor of distraction and one could almost say, perhaps distraction, contentment, perhaps complacency. That's what to shake us from complacency, which only serves to waste this opportunity because it's unrecognized. This then is tied in with impermanence, that reflection on impermanence in the same verse, to shake that complacency and replace it with a sense of urgency, not to waste a moment, recognizing that the time will come when everyone, everything, and I will all be gone. So now is the time to utilize this opportunity well and take each instruction that we are receiving here, verse by verse, and apply it to our mind. This then is followed by a reflection on impermanence, is followed by the understanding of, when this life comes, I have no control over where my rebirth will be. If the imprints are stronger on the one side, I will fall into the suffering lower realms, where the suffering is unimaginable and intense and almost everlasting, in a way that it appears everlasting. Or, if it's virtue that's strongest, I will attain at least a rebirth similar to what I have now. So this is to, again, add urgency. I need to utilize what remains of this life, which may be very short. It's veiled from us. Our duration is veiled. And this then turns us to the verse on refuge. In the same verse, we turn our mind to refuge. The understanding that refuge, or a better translation, we go for protection to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, understanding that it's by developing the qualities of the Dharma within us that we gain actual refuge or protection. Thereafter, we expand. Having developed this sense of urgency, shaken our complacency, we then make our understanding far broader, reflecting now, as we move into the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, on the sufferings of samsara in their entirety, reflecting not, as we have already, on the lower realms, but also those in the upper realms, and here on the varying types of suffering that I mentioned before. In particular, as I've urged you already, focusing on the suffering of transient happiness. Again, to shake our complacency, thinking that the pleasures of this life are worthy of our hopes, of placing our hopes in them and our energy towards achieving them. This limits our view. Our view then remains narrow and confined. But if we break this complacency, our view becomes again expansive, looking beyond this life, looking to what really is possible. This is how we come to understand the reality of the situation and shine light into the darkness of our current confusion. Here then, this understanding is attained in the way that I mentioned before, in the previous segment, with reflections on the sufferings of samsara in great detail, giving rise to desire to gain freedom from the sufferings of samsara, or liberation from our afflictions. This is what we give rise to, a determination that I'll keep our mind focused on that goal. This then is now a far broader, more expansive mind, and our outlook has become significantly more far-sighted than it had been prior to these meditations. So this is where we've got to thus far in the text, the trainings that are shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity.
Korea dunga tada le tu nyube kimne ko sunu yore sibe tambo ne nga zo kewa chima lada mizam je kewa chima zam don nyerje da nga son le kebi nyuba di da kimne ko sunu yore sibe ichi che di da kimro di kewu chungni kyapro sa chegore da yan dile kunno dil ba kya chesta je Korea dunga dile ngaram Korea dunga dile tar고 do dile matan tabmendo 다 Korea dunga tada le kebi nyuba de sul yore gemne konju sumlo yore se bi iche beki iche de gemlo de da gibu jing이 gemlo sa chagoro ba da gibu chimbe gemlo ra de da jayu simbe gemlo lamna da gibu chung chimbe gemlo lamna da dire 제 semjan 탐제 Korea dunga le dro고도 제가 semjan 탐제 Korea dunga le droegi dro고 델레 droe 탑디 semjan 탐제 Korea dunga 델레 droegi 교비 뉴버드 술려는 상계를 건조스로 여러 gemne 건조스 교그리에 집에 제 semjan 탐제기 동화 타다를 교비 뉴버드 gemne 건조스 교그리에 있으면 이체제야 돼 이체비 gem로도 교부 침비 gem로 세고로 봐 세상다 군롱게 타원에 교비 뉴버드 건조스로 여러 세베게다 이체집에 집어인 바로 군롱다 안에 상당한 가치중을 켜봐쇼도
I also want to mention something that I raised recently on refuge, and that to remind you that there are different ways for going to refuge. Now, I'll use this as an illustration. The purpose of the illustration is, in addition to sharing information and therefore knowledge, to remind you of the crucial importance of motivation in at all times, in every act. Because in dependence on our motivation, our refuge varies in strength. So there's the refuge of a practitioner of initial capacity who has generated fear at the very real possibility that at the time of death, the most powerful imprints on one's continuum may be non-virtuous, and therefore one will be helpless to prevent falling into the lower realms, recognizing that the three jewels alone have the power to protect one from falling into the low realms. One turns to them for refuge, for protection. And here you have already the understanding that it means turning for protection, developing the Dharma within one's mind, because that is how protection is attained. If one's motivation, though, is greater than that of it being of initial capacity, but rather one of intermediate capacity, one will have come to recognize that even the so-called upper realms are also pervaded by suffering. There is no peace to be found. Being fed up with this, not wanting this to continue for a moment longer, one turns to the three jewels, recognizing that they have the power to guide us, to develop protection within our own minds from samsara. In other words, we develop the motivation of definite emergence, recognizing that it's through relying on the three jewels, I will cultivate the jewels within myself, and that way, that my protection I will gain from the sufferings of samsara is liberation from samsara. Then the third type of refuge, just like the other two, one turns to the same three jewels with the same understanding that they have the power to protect by guiding us and us developing the minds of the Dharma in our continuum. But the motivation in each of these stages is so much greater. So here, the motivation of a practitioner of great capacity, or the practitioner, or the motivation of a practitioner of the Mahayana Dharma, is to develop one's mind so as to help all beings attain protection from suffering. So here one turns to the three jewels, recognizing that they have the power to protect all beings from suffering. So we see here, in going for refuge, there are different ways to do it. The structure is the same. The motivating mind is vastly different, and so too, therefore, is the power of the refuge, the merit accumulated thereby.
Sanju Kuncho, Chu Kuncho, Kitin Kuncho said, that Sanju Jumdin did Sanju Kuncho. Sanju Jumdin. That Sanji Jumdin, that Papa, Chanju Simba Papa, and the Sanji Gulu Gotina Lamden, the Chu Kuncho Chegore. That Papi Gansa Tiki, Chasan Kinu Kuncho Chagrua. Tisandi Jamno Kuncho Sum said, Chiktua de Tichikre.
And to talk about the three objects of refuge, the Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, and Sangha jewel. The Buddha jewel is the founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. The Dharma jewel is the true cessations and true paths in the continuum of Arya beings, such as Buddha Shakyamuni and all other Buddhas, as well as Arya Bodhisattvas and other Arya beings. And the Sangha jewel are our companions on the path, those Arya beings.
Dizot Nanzuli Shenrua, Aranzuli Shenrua, Dick Jabin, San Jumdin, Aranzuli Shenrua, Papi Kansa, Janju Simba, Papi Kansa, Digi, and Aranzumaro, Aranzuli Shenrua, Consecula Yudikin, Gotina Lamdindi, Conseculi Matanzuli Yomar, Jemanzuli, Rayomar, Toyomarvan. San Jumdin, Digi, Gotin, Aranz, Toyoras and Yomar, the Basan Jumdin, the guard, Chesa. Dada ngāngzule sāngyē dāng pāpē kāngsā dī yu kusung kāsō chū kōnchō dīgē ngāngzule ya ngāngzū kī yu gyab rē sō yu gyab. Tā tēsū kī rōkwa chēpa lā tēne ngāngzū kī nyamnā chē kōrwa chīsā tēlā ya yu gyab sīk rē chī rē. Tā ngāngzū nyamnā chēpa lā tēne ngāngzū nyamnā chē yondū māngō pā na ngāngzū kī lā kōk tēnā lamdīn kī lū kē kīrwa, chik kī kīrwa. Tā ngāngzū kī lā Goktena Lamdin Gula Kiadu, Mahazu Karchagri, Papi Gaza Charurua. Din Yamlin Jebalatine, Mohobana, Sanji Charurua. Chesa Nazu Yamlin Jebalatine, Soso Naranzugi, Soso Rangi, Mohobana, Tobiaki, Susugula Kiaki, Goktena Lamdin Chiche, and Soso Ram Mohobana Papa, San Papa Chagi, Papi Gaza Che, Gidungocho. And then Soso Sangi Biki, Sanji Chagrua, Sanji Concho. Disumbo de la Nazuki, TV Capsicor, Naranzuki, Tobiaki, when Tobiaki captive TV Capsicor, Tama's Captain Master, you kept the TV Capse, Yawalamata, Nichigore. Tabshima, Jemang, and Yamin Chede. Papa Chagirua, Nazukilo Gotena London Girua, Dikir Chikira, Tangazu Yamnichi, Goten Lamni Sosura Papa Chagirua, Papa, then Yamna Jabal, Sosura Sangi Chagirua, 제가 나랑도 파과체비 파과직 나랑도 상기비 소소랑 상기비 상기 마오바나 소소랑 상기비 상기 마오바나 소소랑 파과체비 파과 아니 마오바나 소소규레게 고트나 람딘 다디디서 다디 주비 다디 내가서 요래서는 요 말에 마오바나 가서 염내되는 나랑도 규라 용해야 디래 디숨버들 제접시고래
The way I've just described the three jewels is the common presentation, and you would have all heard it many, many times. What we have here are, with the three jewels, they're jewels of refuge. Those are the three jewels of refuge that we turn to for refuge or protection. The Buddha, the founder teacher, the Sangha jewel, the Arya beings, our companions, and the Dharma jewel, the continuums, the realizations in their continuums. These are all external to us. These are the causal refuge. In that, through relying on them and their guidance and their training, they serve as the cause for refuge. Or to use the clearer translation, they serve as the cause for protection. In other words, for the realizations we developing in our continuum. They are the causal refuge, in that through relying on them, they cause protection to be generated in our continuum. Then, as we continue to...
Okay.
Then as we continue to train and transform our mind, progressing towards becoming, attaining our own true cessations and true paths in our continuum, in other words, generating our own Dharma jewel in our continuum, which is when we will also become an Arya Bodhisattva, an illustration of the Sangha jewel, and later through our own development, our own progression, arise as a Buddha. The Buddha jewel, we thereby have these as our eventual attainments, and that will be the resultant refuge. We will become a refuge or source of refuge or protection for others through our training. The true paths and true cessations that will be generated within us are our actual protection, as we will be a Sangha jewel as well, and be able to guide others skillfully, progressing to become a Buddha, the most skillful of guides. So this then, the refuge we will become, is the resultant refuge.
Dine da ngara zuye nyamlen je ngara zugula kokten nyomoba pampi pambo kokten de da ngara zuge jebu tobya joro ngara zuge tobya du dene ngara zuge mane ngasole tawar pape lamden de kokten de ngara zugula mane ji yodu ngara ngasole ge wala tawar da ngason ge yayoma deje 제상 최고조디 ngasole khowale kyop sedi khowale de leda nyomo khowale ge marwa ngaso ngason 인야와 이다 둔로 제가 난선 시그와 제가 나눠 주기라 가르치고 그러시네 아주 냠는지나 파베 가사토도 곡된다 람데는 나눠 주기를 끼어도 나눠 파베 가사 차선으로 와 제가 파베 가서 차와서 다 람데 줄에 끼에서 최고 정한 주기를 끼에서래 나눠 주 곡된다 람데 최고 조여래 제가 나눠 주 파베 가사 차래 파베 끼는 거죠 차바래 제가 나선에 끼와래 탈바래다 나선 끼와래 껴바래 다 탈바래 디르와 어디 나저 두스 냠는 제대다 녀모바 사보나 제바 빵베 곡된데 수규래 끼어도 안에 가래 코위 동안에 탈바래다 코위 동안에 껴바래다 진짜 당한 저기 냠는 제대 상계 소소라 상계 고방 토요도 안에 녀모바 바차다 제바래 껴바래다 진짜 껴세디 나주 규래 끼어도 껴고다 뭐네 껴칸디 수 껴고라서네 아주 제비 잡디 가서 주변도 가서 다 코발에 껴바래 껴고래
When one starts to attain the resultant refuge, In other words, when one becomes an Arya being oneself and attains the Dharma jewel within oneself, so one attains those two jewels already, one has gained liberation from the lower realms, from any potential rebirth. It's impossible to be reborn in the lower realms. So at this point, one has just realized emptiness directly, and thereby has generated one's first true cessation and true path in one's continuum. So newly, for the first time since beginning this time, generated the Dharma jewel within oneself, and now one is suitable to be called an Arya being. So one is now also for the first time a Sangha jewel. As one continues to train, one will eradicate the afflictions with their seeds entirely, and thereby gain liberation from samsara in its entirety. So here, one still remains, but with growing strength, of those two jewels, the Dharma and Sangha jewel that one is, and later, through our continued progression, one arises as now the third and final jewel, as a Buddha jewel. So this then is the attainment of the resultant refuge.
아니 생기로 주심바 소소기 규잡 로바지긴 규잡세 권조 숨제다 이지 제월 디숨들 이 제월에서 올라 대단 하는 주 가르 제월에서네 생규 규 상계 권조 상계 좀 된다라서 봐 파베 강사라서 봐 다들 현다지 가는 줄 멤베 상계지 상계를 권조를 디디를 권조 잡수도도 디네 냠는 제게 람 마노와디 상계 권조기 띵기리 셈베게다 타지도 이시셔야 돼 이시셔야지 다디 마노와 땡제 아니 생 파부에 가사디기 날이야 람도 로고체 땡땡 지그리 습이 이시셔야 돼 다디리 잡수라다디 유잡들 당 하나 저기 다디니 다디니 냠수 렘바제 상기 람마노와 땡는 기니고 로 제발레드는 소속이 냠는 제데 꼭된다 람데 의규를 끼어도 디끼어도 하 땡땡다 나선을 끼어들 타바레서 탈기레서 이치지야다 단 녀모바 사본나 제바 빵베 빵바든 가는 길에 끼어도 마 코발레 땡땡 탈기레서 이치지야 당아 상기 고방 톱여도 안에 가래 콜비 녀모 가서 녀모 바샤드 제발레 탈바레서데 이치지야 되다 니니 다 이제나로 되었습니다스 이도와 당아저 잡수 좋아서도 두시네 지산다 쪼디 저기 제산 콜비 동안 녀모 바 차산을 빵베 빵바 소소길라 톱여든가 콜비 동안 땡땡 탈게 선비 이시지 디르와다 지다 제비고저 상계랑 상계 파베 강사 차지 파베 강사도 기능을 저러와 지다 소소 파베 기능 파베 강사 차지 소주길라 람딘 길라 끼어도 안 소소라랑 콜비 나선레 탈바레 탈게서 이치지야 지로 제비 잡리 이치지다 저와 지다 소소라 냠네 지 상계 고방 토병 가서 녀모 바샤네 사본네 제바 빵베 빵바디 소수길라 토묘도 데네 소수기 데뷔 최고권초랑 길에 끼고로 토묘로 지다 디 토묘도 코르에 동안랭아 땡땡 탈그리에서 비지 탈그리에서 단 녀모 바샤다 제바 상지 소소랑 상지 고방 토묘도 아니 녀모 바샤다 제발라 땡땡 탈바리 탈그리에서 비지 제지다 상지 현 상지기다 주세마디 말라 람던디 마노 지기레서 비지디 딩이도 다 삼단하로 이치 제하로 없이 되네 차고도 하다 땜르지
Having faith in the three jewels we can now understand through being two different sets of objects. There's one, the causal refuge, whom are our companions. They're external, they are what our examples and guides, and what we strive to attain, that is our realizations within our own continuum, which means the resultant refuge. So we have these two sets. The one, which is the causal refuge, are external to us, and they are our guides and companions. then that's a causal refuge, a resultant refuge, is what we are striving to cultivate within ourselves. So when turning, for example, to the Buddha jewel for refuge, we see the founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, as the unmistaken teacher of the unmistaken path. The causal element is, and I will attain a state just like that. The Dharma jewel, we recognize true cessations and true paths in the continuum of Arya beings. This is actual freedom. These are the true cessations, it's the state of no pain, no suffering. And the path, the true paths, is how one attains that. And in the continuum of Arya Bodhisattvas is what will be developed into the attainment of the state of an Arya Buddha. So there we see we have great faith, unshakable faith, or again the synonyms of trust or conviction in true cessations and true paths that are in the continuum of others. That's the causal refuge, with the determination that by following the guidance that we've received, we will generate them in ourselves, and in this way give rise to the Dharma jewel within ourselves, and gain actual protection, because it's freedom from suffering. And that's then the resultant refuge. And in terms of the Sangha jewel, there are our Arya companions. These are our teachers and our guides, our companions on the path, and our role models. We have unshakable trust in them, recognizing that they are reliable friends. That's a causal refuge. Through following their guidance, their example, I will generate the resultant Dharma jewel within me, and in this way, I will also become a resultant Sangha jewel. I'll be counted amongst them as a peer and be of great benefit to others. And this then is refuge in the resultant Sangha jewel. So this then is how one goes for refuge to the two different sets of the three jewels, the causal refuge and the resultant refuge.
Tene inza dakarasana sosugi tobyagi chuegoncho de sosugi nyamlenje tobyagi delya yishi zangmaji majebaina tenegi tobyo yana mena tobne dunga kanga setugi na mena sambaine di tobyagi bezol jigmarwa 지산 delya di tob나 de chuegoncho de ngeguli kesonda 겐당아 동안 고용아서 동안에 타리에서비 다 녀모바 사보나 제바 빵베 빵바 고든 최권초 등이 줄에 낀다 코르 동안에 타리에서 이치 주여바래 제자데 이치 여바자 니 이치 여바자 데 이치 템포 가제 이치 슉체 주여베네 여베네 제자디 라야게 된달이야 하는 아주 배수체제 제자님 배수체제 곰냠네 체 슉체제 체제도네 디 교화도 두고 그러지 제자디 돈다디래
The purpose of understanding this is it's not just a mere intellectual exercise that's interesting to know, but rather so that one can strive to develop faith, trust, conviction in the three jewels. Because the stronger, more reliable this is within us, sincerely, the more we will strive to implement the trainings that we receive. The second, and when this is not in relation, at first it will be in relation to the three causal refuges. But when this is also in relation to the resultant refuge, our strength of mind is that much stronger. So for it to come in relation to the resultant refuge, comes with the recognition, I can do this. It is not beyond me. To give rise to that comes about in dependence on knowledge and gaining experience of that knowledge, seeing, yes, I really can do this. My mind is changing. I can become the three jewels myself. And as one develops this trust and conviction in the three jewels, one applies oneself with greater vigor, enthusiasm, and sincerity.
Bene dirushirwa 아주 지게 레가질이야 육리스다지 육리 초고에나 니 롭천디 신고고로 와다 신고고로 와. 다 마신 소소 마신 바네 미전다 신베네 소소 육초에스가요 말와 소소 신고고로 와. 다 신고 그것도 안에 저기 대랍켄 현다 긴 지요 봐지 다 디기 야보 신경 지요 봐지 랍켄 세상 안 저기 디기 긴 알 랍그래서 코에 알 남든 제그래서 비 23마 찍지 디라바데 능이 장제 디 신소나 아디 다 강아지 세그래서 비게 삼로 숙치문 이여바나 된 남사 안디 랍켄델이야 안에 랍로지 줘야다 디자를 럽된 쉬야다 되네 자야지 자야 고소 제 자야도 소 신용도 소소 마시면 강아지 세주고 와 배디나지로 왔다 가는 중에 강아 세야데 디기 주비에 가서 누가 코에 누가래 타야기 탑람데 상이 좀 된데 파베게 된다 상이기 랍그레스 땡그레스 비 23마 디템발에 콘스 템바데 냠는 제발에 때네 나는 길에 똑바디 길에 투그레 덥나 나 코에 가서 코와래 누가래 타그레스 비 22디 단 언도스제들 용고자 당한 주기 되네 지네 20제 내가 아주 냠는 제제는 즉 코에 누가래 타교고 탈고마도 제 나도 냠는 맞으면은 나 상기 다 밥에 가서디 코 톱살에 돼 이내 콘스길라 최고조 열에 밥에 기는 열에 상기 공조 등한 주기다 나도 맞네 코알이 나도 교 두면도 안 돼.
If you think of an area in your life where you have or have had interest in coming to know and understand, then that other people know about that topic, well, good for them, but it doesn't help me. I want to know. There may be many experts all over the show, but my mind still is ignorant on this topic. I want to know. Therefore, when one has this determination to come to understand, to gain knowledge on an area, one will seek out someone who's then knowledgeable. One will seek out an excellent teacher, a reliable source, someone you can talk to and find out about the situation, what they say you can trust and rely on, because you are ignorant. You will be open and receptive to whatever is said. So you want someone who knows what they're saying and is honest and dependable and has your interests first and foremost. So this is what we do in the world, and when we have this interest, we match it with a reliable source, then we go there and we find out. Now to take that and apply it here to the three jewels. When one has, to the extent that one develops true faith, trust and conviction in the Buddha and his teachings, and those who've practiced the path and have gained incredible transformative realizations, to the extent one has faith in them, one will seek them out and want to hear what they say, and not take that as a mere intellectual exercise, what one is hearing, but will value it such that one will apply it to one's mind repeatedly over a sustained period. And as that conviction, as the conviction in them plays out in terms of our own experiential benefits of this guidance, and we now knowing not just intellectually that the three jewels are unmistaken, but we feel that transformation. Our vision is raised, knowing I can do this. I can do this. And with that, there'll be no holding us back, no thought of, yeah, I suppose I can, or it would be nice. We will apply ourselves right now because we've met flawless examples. And not only do we now no longer just consider ourselves fortunate, but we recognize, I can become just like them. I can transform my mind and also, like them, have a transformative impact on the world around me. With such a mind, we will apply ourselves right now and continuously implementing those teachings into our mind. Let's now come to the trainings of the Bodhisattvas, the Mahayana Dharma. In verse 89, I'm just going to change one word in the translation in the first line to the translation we're most used to. So it's verse 89. Please bless me to develop uncontrived compassion like a loving mother for her precious child, by considering how all tormented beings are my mothers, who have raised me with kindness again and again.
나디기 가르친 거라서는 잠바다 인지 겁나 순거를 당하나 저기 태바 쳔비기 냠레 람 귤레 깨와라 장슈 셈세디 귤레 깨고 그래. 지난 장슈 셈 귤레 깨와라 장슈 셈 귤레 깨기 규디다 잠바다 인지 라산 남다 세디 라산 남다 세디 그래. 라산 남다 깨와라 인지 쳔보 아니 잠지 세디 그래. 지난다 어디 깨워딘 자다 안델야 인지 깨기 이 탑람 데네시 고모 삼땅고레 세디고슈고르 숭고르든마.
The trainings presented in this verse open the doorway to the Mahayana Dharma. It's through accomplishing what is presented here that one enters the paths of a bodhisattva. In other words, generates bodhicitta within one's continuum and is counted amongst bodhisattvas. In order to generate this beautiful, precious mind, one needs to go through a sequence of trainings that will result in bodhicitta, which is immediately preceded by the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility. This being a result comes independence on a cause. Its cause is great compassion. Great compassion is a result of its causes, love and compassion. So this verse then presents the method to train through love and compassion, universal, the altruistic attitude, and bodhicitta.
semje tamje dungana dana sembigi inji chimbo geada semje namje dewada dena sembigi jamje ge jamba gealya andi karasam dangorasene nyelya nganjogi semje lya karasori ngao komgorase ido taworase ido komgorese ido de kogorese ore.
The sequence, bodhicitta preceded by altruism, preceded by great compassion, preceded by love and compassion, has as its foundational practice that of developing a sense of closeness to all beings, overcoming our current nearness to some and distance from others, and developing a sense of closeness and affinity with all beings.
나딜마 두스치네 냠다 조와 디군 다기마 시데다 가지기 셈제 다당보 다이디시가 저기 기부팅이 급급리아 아니가 소다 안예외 둥아 삼다가 가소한테 강가 되는데 요든도 이달에 강가 되는데 요래가 밀이야 되네 할이야 되네 요래세비 둥아 삼다하지 다스가 저 셈제 탐제를 봐자시 안에 셈제 탐제데 되네 셈제 탐제 냠다 조와 디군 다기마 시데 되네게 냠다베 셈제 강하면 오테리가 되네 셈제 디다 탐제네 그래서는 소설이야 린체보다 소설이야베 판도 신부에 셈비게 삼당고래라다 냠다 조와 디군 다기마세 야 소설이야 린체보다 소설이야 린체보다 소설 판도 신부에 삼당고래스.
The first line in the Tibetan is our third line. And the first words in the Tibetan are all tormented beings. We have, by this stage in the practice, we have meditated well on the sufferings of the 6 realms, starting already in the trainings of being of initial capacity, reflecting on the sufferings of the lower realms, and thereafter reflecting on the sufferings of the upper realms and samsara in its entirety. So we've come to a clear understanding of suffering and its causes. And of course we know not only do we suffer like this, but everyone suffers in this way. So we have a vivid understanding of what it is like to be tormented, us ourselves. And we've given rise to this determination, I can't take this anymore. What I saw before as pleasure, I know is just deceiving me. That too is veiling the underlying pain of samsara and the endless misery of samsara. So we have this determination to bring an end to our own pain and misery. Now, we apply it to each and every sentient being throughout the 6 realms. We need here to relate to them in a way that has a sense of an affinity to them, seeing them as dear, as of great value and precious to us.
Denegi dunga do koigi leda nyo miliki na leda nyo mo kewa de la dunga resha chisa dunga de la tago du chisa ngara dunga de la tago de janga taba toba jigin sembege samlo denis tangor wada dadi ne gabla semjing dunga na su de samda de ngara dunga de la tago de semgo marda 가서 심지어 동아디게 나수디 디니게 심지어 냠다 동안 나디게 통도 디니게 심지어데게 베다 장려야 진천보지나 라려야 판도 첨보 말에 약부지게디 삼지 삼다데 소소래 약부지게 인삼 삼다데 안 갈라그래 가르삼 그랬으네 말에 약부지게도 삼나 팔에 약부지게다 가불리 그러와 제사데 나주게 이도 원화비 삼을 깨야려야 아니 냠답이 좋아 디다 삼지 아니 라려야 배 약부래 세비게 다 라려야 판도 첨보다 라려야 깨딘 첨보 인삼비게 삼다디 파 이도 원화 깨게 된다라 되는 삼당고 그래지래.
I want this to be very clear how the transition from the 2 initial trainings now into the trainings of a being of great capacity. Because this is the indispensable foundation. Without a clear understanding of the sufferings of samsara and its causes, one will not have given rise to an understanding that the cause of our pain lies within. If we're still thinking the cause of our pain lies outside of us, we will not be able to feel a sense of closeness to those we consider as potential enemies. So we have to have recognized the source of my pain, it's my own afflictions. And this is what I need liberation from. Not annoying human beings, my own mind. So therefore it's essential that we have gained stable realization of the trainings of initial and intermediate capacity. Then we have the foundation to lift our gaze based on our own experience and recognize all those around me, both seen and unseen throughout the realms, are in pain for the same reasons as I am. And here we are now ready to truly develop an equal sense of closeness to all, recognizing that just like right now, I'm not aware of the long lifespans and karmic connections with them, but they have all been dear to me. Just like I can't perceive all their suffering, ways they are actually suffering because I can't perceive them all. They are suffering and in need of liberation, desiring liberation. Just like I can't see that, I can though intellectually recognize it and how much in life to life these beings have shown me kindness, have directly helped me, and indirectly their own activities benefit me so. Here we build on this, recognizing how others across lifetimes, directly and indirectly, help us. So how can we not help them in response in this time of their dire need? So in this way, we start to develop a sense of closeness to others, feeling a sense of closeness towards all others.
지다 semjen 탐제 라래 딘침보다 라래 깨딘침보 라래 판도침보 데니게 삼다 데네 디 삼다 데니게 삼다 대안에 가서 그랬습니다. 저기 하고해야 저기 체디기 다 소소기 체델이야 소소 판도지가 먹고할 때 이내 다 체디기 아마디 저기 판도치보이 마데 저기 삼나라 셈다니에 지다 가신 그랑기 파마디 안디나 랑기 파마디나네 랑기 아마디 또 삼데 아미기 안 지게 조나를 봐 두신데 다오구스냐 데나 아미 마기다 아미 오마데 아미 잠겨제 데네 유세비 데네 지치데 지 아마디 랑리아 진침보 배 그래 체디가 아마디 진침보 두신의 소속에 최디가 아마디 진침보에 삼다에도 다기 마 소소랑기 아마디 진침보다 소소 판도이면 두신의 그 진침보 임바데 삼다 되네 삼다에도 나 안에 양양 진기 잡아 세대데 지나다 세대 지도다 세디가 아마디 되네 그든 잡아 심진 디수차 젠 차사다데 랑디 저 여바다 매바다 차사 안 디송이 아마 마치바 지어 말스 아마 제용을 자시다레스 제자다 다딩이 세디가 아마디 ngal야 그든 제바 나신 아니 콘수 제마 녀마이 아마 지도 갑라 ngal야 세디가 아마 그든 제바 나두 스네 그든 장요레스 제산 그든 장와레스 제자데 양양스데 디야 렌징 많이 받다 빠도 매바 사람 망부 아마 야네 야도 아마 지요레스 제자데 아마 지도 갑라 아니 사디니기 장리 대바딩 하는 소리야 말이야 안 셈전 탐지기에 아마 제제 용화 장자래 제용도 아마 제 사람 망보 제용은 디 사람 제 아마 제타르리야 세디 아마 그든 장마 나싱알에 판도도 제바래 제자 셈전 탐제 뱀 마스베라야 그든 첨부 세디 아마단 캬바메데 되네 그든 첨부 쇼시 인삼백이 루스네 삼당 공고래서 삼당 고래서도 What
we're trying to do here is to radically transform how we innately relate to others. What we're wanting to do is come to a place where we feel a sense of closeness to whomever we encounter, whether we physically encounter them or they appear to our mind, we call them to mind. So see, relating to all that we encounter as in a way that we see them as pleasant or attractive. So we have a gentle, tender approach to all, whoever comes to our mind. So this is the sense of closeness. There's no enemies here. There's no one that we're indifferent to. We feel a sense of closeness, affinity with all. So to generate this, we start by recalling the kindness that was shown to us at our most vulnerable. And here for most, they will turn to the mum of this life, or whomever was their primary caregiver. The illustration will be towards one's mum, but one can apply it anywhere, to whomever. One recalls that when we were unborn, we had absolutely no control over ourselves. We were entirely dependent on her care. And we know, we can be confident that from the moment she heard of our conception, the moment she heard that there was life within her own body, she would have immediately stopped everything, taken a deep breath, changed how she lived her life. She would have carried us with tremendous care and concern. And as we grew, and her discomfort grew, it would have all been worth it because of her care for this being inside. And then eventually we were born, and despite this incredible pain that she went through, a moment later, when she held us in her arms, only love filled her mind. Her body disappeared, no thought of her own discomfort, no thought of her intense pain, just this precious life in her arms. And that attitude continued, always caring for us. And with the forefront of her motivation was to do the very best she could for us. She would have been more and less successful at this, but that motivation would have always been there. Her precious, precious child first. So here we recall this, and then we logically apply this to others. Because lifetimes have been beginningless. Every being and I have this relationship of parent and child. I cannot point amongst those around me and say, who was my mother or father in the past life? But they were, in this life, and that life, and that life, and perhaps many times. These relationships are with all beings. And therefore, with different times and different connection, that kindness by that being was shown to me. Each and every single being I have ever met or ever called to mind, they have cared for me with the same tenderness as the mother of this life. So this is how we start to train our mind here.
On dus chene semjen thamche ane rangi dus chene sam ma chenyo rangi tingi kyangpa dus sam dang yu dene semjen di ngale yagare di ngale duga chere sinde yagdu che kaya ma cheza semjen thamche tangyum re sosol ya pan do ba jibu jigya tangyum re ma do di ngale yaga chere di yu duga chere se yawa che me ga da me yonggu ba kasne semjen thamche rangi ma pa do me ba chenyo ma chenyo no chi do ane 지 판도 직바인자 심전 탐제는 직 나는 진천보다 하는 판도 침바 직바인 심바 당용 that's some 당용 들리고 기고로 와다
First step was recalling the kindness of our mum, and then we expanding it to all beings to develop impartiality or equanimity. For this meditation to be transformative, our mind needs to be very expansive. So, thus far this evening I've mentioned many times about the differing steps of the earlier meditations, how they lift our vision, make our mind more expansive and more far-sighted. Because to enter the path of the Bodhisattva, one needs the most incomparably broad and expansive mind. Even here, the very first step of the trainings, before one even enters the paths, one needs to be encompassing all beings throughout all realms, bearing in mind and having this in mind, the innumerable lifespans we've had, unimaginable life forms, and over an inconceivable span of time. All these beings we are entwined with. At various points, they look down on us with care and compassion, as a newborn child. This then serves to shake us from this attitude of discrimination, where we discriminate between individuals and groups, holding some as more valuable and others as lesser. We see there is no logical basis for this at all. In fact, it's quite shameful to hold this one as more valuable to me, and that person as less valuable to me. We try and shake us from this way of thinking.
That dinegi dus chine samdada di membege thone na ju chetile samdavina sosugi the pama membege that sosu jam moma shingwara samdavine ta sosugi ju tulo koya da saya toya da kanisrangorasne da jiso shengi legale 안 지기 샹을 때네 직 샘제래 대변하는 주게 사야도 요마라 소바다 주라라서 가르네 셴 샘제래 때네 콘주게 되네 지라고 아니 안 주기 셴 레가레ging 때네 그리고 진짜 샹을 때네 랑기 두시나 삼다도 아 저기 수부디에 쳐야 돼 수부디에 라야 돼 그래서는 파마나 아말레 때네 라와르 수부디에 소경저 쳐야 돼 파마다 아말레 때네 소와 안디 세야도 튕기디게 샹을 때네 라도게 차상하다 나주게 라 차상 샹을 때네 버 소소 롭정 되 신바데 샹이 롭정 되 샹을 때네 라도 봐 제사다 나서를 가르도스네 뇨모바다 코나사야다 되자게디마도 셴 야가디 차상 샹을 때네 라고 지라도 지단 셴디 빼면서 두섬단다 소소 모신바다 마신바 무신다 아니 심진 눈으로 지니 소술이야 판도지 깨진 쳔보 임바 두섬다데 랑랑레 상아 수차상 콘솔레 띠엔데 봐 콘솔레 띠네 아니 용고 봐 차기도 제가 디네 인자 저기 셴디 빼마세랑레 진쳔보다 깨진 쳔보 판도 쳔보 짜 쳔보 휴시도 와 선배기 대수게 삼네 양네 양도 두 땅에도 qabla 아니 셴디 짜 쳔보다 소술레 진치 야고시 레샤 선배 삼 야고치 끼어도 안 될야 빼마세 가부용 거로 와다 가부용 거로 와 대 가부용 거로 제가 되네 안에 이동화 드리고 이동 가부 대 가부래네 이동화 레래 진짜 이동화 약벌레서나 이동화래서나 다 소소 가서 될이야 안에 나도 두치는 겁니다 이동화도 두고 다뭐 대 소셜 주기야
what we're doing in this meditation is striving to develop impartiality or equanimity. We do so through reflecting or using as our starting point, recalling incomparable kindness our mothers have shown us. What we're trying to do is break this long-held habituation to holding ourselves first and foremost as precious, and then what is within our own group as we define it, this changing group, but making them second most important and the rest mere helpers in our happiness. This we're trying to destroy, radically transform, by trying to develop a closeness to all, a sense of affinity with all, seeing all others as attractive in the sense that merely calling someone to mind, joy arises. Just the mere thought of someone, joy arises, because they are dear to me, whomever they are. So here we reflect, just because our time is short, so just very briefly, but in your own meditations, make this expansive. Recall when we are so vulnerable, and as human beings this lasted for many years, all that we had was due to the care of our parents. The care in the womb, as a young person, our food, our education, our clothing, that we were taught how to behave and not behave. It all came about in dependence on the care primarily of our parents, but also more broadly, and we also then need to expand this. Our parents they may have fed us, they may have worked so as to feed us. They didn't grow the food. There we thank the entire population of human beings involved in food production, from the farmers to the distributors to the store staff and everyone in between, and the insect life that pollinated our food, and the animals that we ate and whose skins we wore. And moreover, the houses that we lived in, the goods we made use of, all of this were created, designed, mined by a wide variety of people over many generations in terms of technological development. So then we come to recognize that all that I've experienced and enjoyed in this life has come about in dependence on others. And of those others, almost all of them are not only unseen but unknown to me. And many of them will have long since died. Previous generations' knowledge that led to later generations' knowledge that led to the current technology in the world. These people are long dead, but their knowledge is helping me. We come to realize the interconnected relationship that we share with all beings. We can even come to recognize, again in our meditation, to stir us, to change ourselves, that all that is good that we have or ever will experience has come about in dependence on others. Everything. Where we take sole responsibility for our own afflictions, the pain in our life, that's dependent on our faulty way of thinking. The good that we experience comes from others. So this is a skillful way to think so as to value others more, to raise them in our esteem, and break down the sense of us ourselves as being of primary importance. Because again, just to conclude, what we're looking for, what we're trying to develop is a sense of closeness to all, so that whomever we call to mind, whose ever name we hear on the news or wherever, joy arises. My kind mother.
Andinigi sometime another pene dubi bula sewe machine said Amadiki soso pupo go shuj amachi yoba amadil pu to chiyoba in the Amadi pu the sewa shuch your wada Chisanda Pudilla Kawushu, Chöpa Inza, and the Pudi Kibuya, Dondala, Amigi Kalatiare, and Duloyare, and Zemotiare, Pat, Chilape Yajan, and Chipat, Gemosho Ducere, Chasa Pudi, Deoya, and the Jigi, Amigi, Tapshishu Chigurua, and Jeda, and the Pudi, Dunha, Dunha Selia, Gamacha, Amigi, Tapshishu, Dunha Segi, the Chigurua, Dunha Diag. On Pedi Nashi, the Jing of the Simjan, the Jinchabo, the Kedinchabo, do Jisamta, and Amigi, Pu, Zewa, Pu, Zewa, Chick, Gawa Nashin, and Anjig, Simja, Tamjelia, Gawuda, and Jig, Yidu, Mas Gawuchi Leo, and Delia, Simjan, Tamjelia, Dewajakon, Juna, Sabigita, Dewadi, the Jamzik, some leagues. She's not the Dewadi Juna, Simbe, Jamzik, some lady, then the Simjan Tamje, and the Dua that Jahot Sibi, Dua that Jana Simbi, Niki leagues. She's not those Janeta, Simjan Tamje, Dewadi, Dena Simbi, the Jambagomiata, Simjan, Duma, Jana Simbikin, and the Niji Gomiat, Lucian Dupu.
The third line in the Tibetan, our second line, like a loving mother for a precious child. This word loving, it's a particular Tibetan word which encompasses both love and compassion. So here we recall our relationship with our own mum and the care that she gave to us, as well as our father and perhaps siblings, to come to a real recognition of how we were cared for. Develop this sense of appreciation towards them. And we can also take examples from what we observe, either as a parent oneself or what one observes, how young children turn to their mothers, how they look at their parents. And we can see that relationship because the child is very aware of the care and the kindness, the tender affection that they receive from their parents. And this is what we are trying to call to mind in our own lived experience so that we can apply it to others. So as we come to feel a sense of closeness towards all, starting to see them as valuable and dear to us, our heart softens and it opens. We start to feel tender towards all. This then is the indispensable foundation so as to develop love and compassion for them. Feeling close to others, we want them to be happy. We want them to be free of suffering. This then, feeling close to them, we will want to do all we can to help them experience lasting happiness through accumulating those causes and be freed of suffering and its causes. We'll want to do all we can for them because we hold them as dear, because they abide in our heart.
Danine, Simjan Dewana, Dena, Sembiki, Jambata, Simjan Dungana, Jana, Sibi, Nichi, Yawazam Mase, Di, Kojuma Maimba Yawaresada. Dangazu Gabriel, that Nichi, Dungala Jana, Sibi, Nichi, Kenya, Lamsa Yedria, that in Ungurova. She's a Denigi member, Kokomji, the Jimin Nichi, Juma Maimbasan, Kunganga, Shushuki, called some Tamo Lamsa, Chik Toin, Lamsa, and the Chiki. Nichi Ganga Shushuki, Jumama in Bachik Kukures, Chisan Jumama, Jimmy Niji Gaver, the Nishiki Wood Sebe, the Nigi Gaber Chicken Sebe Com, Rani Com, and Delia and the Nigi Gage, Nikin Chinanga Barchetam Chesage, Lame Jin of the New and Yudo, and Jimmy Niji Gaver, Niji Gaver, and Lame Jin love to so such Lamaya Sotep Shiada, Dushin Rani Com, ne Lamalia, and Dushin Ya Sotep Shiada, Dushine. The
Tibetan concludes with what we have in the first line. Please bless me to develop uncontrived compassion. Uncontrived then means we have generated this mind of holding others as dear, feeling love and compassion for them so many times. And it's been abiding within us that it now starts to arise spontaneously and remain. It doesn't need to be intentionally generated. doesn't need to be contrived or intentionally generated. It spontaneously arises and abides. That's the goal. And it comes about through doing this meditation. And just like within the meditation, we see in the last line in the English, that how our mothers have raised us with kindness again and again. So we recall on our mother was unrelenting in having us first and foremost, our welfare first and foremost. In the same way, we need to be unrelenting in this reflection, again and again engaging in this meditation and keeping it present as we go through our day, generating it again and again, keeping the sense of closeness in mind with others. Then in that way, our compassion becomes uncontrived. We turn here to our Lama at the very conclusion, seeking his blessings, his inspiration, so that this meditation is successful and we do attain uncontrived compassion.
아니 디 당보 제바제 삼다 제곰사지 도차고 제곰사차고 들어서네 샘잔 담제 라레 진천부 임베기 김전 삼다 아니 지게 파마제 용의 김전 삼다 아니 안에 양도 집에 삼다 안데 샘잔 담제의 파마제만요 디기 제바를 디기 맞아 가야 민두스비 제바제 삼다 저는 디도 저는 제바제 디지 제곰으로 차기도 제바제 주체 제바지는 간섬질이야 안 두시도 샘잔 탐제라야 진천보다 끄진천 짱짱 레도와 선배기다 지게 집에 이동화도 빼 약보 레도와 선배기 삼로지 샘딩네 디레어도 되는 라신기 곧 되네 디기 슈겐기 샘잔 탐제 대화다 되나 선배 삼로지 리고로 봐다 되네 레어도 then dine samja tamje dewa de tempersho sambega samnodida zejidu gomje an jogomje zejidu jambada shishin tenshi namya wadu mason waje samja dewa de tempersho sambege gomyache an dinashin an deshi gyumzendige samdaye jelya an samja de dunga de chawu do chesada dunga da jana sambe chawa sho sambege da delya ya jik zejidu samdabana jogomra chagdo chesan dangbo jebaje semchen dewa rangla jinchen bu yinpe samda ne delia kiri yaburesha din zada dewa tenpa shio sempe jamba kumdu zechi samda da jizan semchen kanga dine kanga sego dine zada semchen dunga da chawu du chawa shio sempe gida niji samda de ko zechi du ju hom jia de nye le jinchen bu yinpa sa yang samda jeba chi samda da dunga chago rang dunga mindo bane semje dunga dine desu dunga da chago sembe jeba je samda dine je samda ne dijele ane semje dewa da temba sho sembe komya da semje dunga da jana sembe ni jo komya dine komne yane jamba da ni jo komne yane ka komje kasam chile da joma ma imbe go wa gedina lamsa jaya ke semje thon lamsa ninje sambe jamba lamsa jaya chi le tu구에서 받아 데네 투도 봐도 공부고래서 다 데네게 투야 공부랑 공부하다 안 라말이야 안 질랍나로 제스 라말이야 소듭체와다 모두신 라다 라마 이담려 소와데 도신 공부고래서 돼.
So to conclude with the meditation, I'll go through it in a few additional points, which I've mentioned before in terms of how to engage in meditation. So primarily, our meditations are analytical. In other words, we're thinking for ourselves, based on reasons. This is indispensable. One has to use analysis. The more reasonings one uses, the quicker one transforms one's mind, and the deeper that transformation. The less reasons one utilizes, the slower and less effective transformation is. And to use reasons, one needs to receive many teachings. So here the reasoning to use analytical. You start with recalling the kindness of this life's mother in the ways that I've mentioned already. You then expand that by recognizing the kindness of others, those that we know, as well as the many that are unknown to us, that all that we enjoy and have enjoyed is due to the kindness of others. We receive the beneficial results of their labor. Thereafter, recognizing the kindness of all, we also take this to lives before this. This isn't the first time they've shown me kindness. They've been my mother in my past life. Every person who comes to mind has held me in her arms with care. We do this so to break down this separation between myself and my group and the rest. Rather, we see all as attractive. At the mere calling them to mind, joy arises. That's my dear mom. That's my dear mom. To the extent we can bring this up within us, the wish for, I want the very best for them arises. Just like arises in our own minds for our parents, and as so many times they have towards us. Wherever this strong emotion now arises, you then switch from analytical meditation and you abide there. You're now going to the second type of meditation, placement meditation. So you just place your mind. You're not analyzing, you're resting. If one has the union of calm abiding meditative insight, that's perfect. But for us, that's no problem. We just rest with the quality of concentration we have. And when our introspection notices that the feeling that has arisen is fading, then immediately we use mindfulness and we resume the meditation. We either repeat what we've done or we continue. And then again, strong emotion will arise. And then we stop our analytical and abide with placement. And that will fade, and we either repeat or continue. And in this meditation, thus far, I've just mentioned about recalling the kindness, recalling our mother of this life and the kindness and expanding it to all beings. And then with this comes a wish to repay kindness. So that I've mentioned. And we develop that wish then into, may all beings, these dear, dear beings, be free of pain and the causes of pain. May their afflictions may they eradicate their afflictions and stop engaging in any form of non-virtue. Compassion arises for them, and we abide. It fades, we repeat, and abide. And then we go to love. May all beings, being freed of suffering, abide in lasting happiness. May they accumulate only causes for happiness, all virtuous minds, gaining ever greater familiarity with them. Generate sincere love for all. We abide with it. So in this way, in the meditation, we go through the sequence of recognizing all beings as being our mothers, their tremendous, first the kindness of the mother of this life, applying it to all beings, and then the determination to repay that kindness, then love and compassion for them, and at each step as we're moving through, alternate from analytical to placement and back again. This then is how you do this meditation, and the technique is used in all other meditations too. So thank you. Our time is up for this. Absolutely.
I'm just, we're learning a lot in this example with the Lama Chöpa, the meaning, and it's helping me a lot in practicing prayers and so on. And I've always found the more I understand, the more powerful the prayers are. So it's about generating your attention and understanding. But I also wonder, when you do prayers, say in Tibetan, and you don't know the meaning, it's got its own strength behind it too. And often we practice without knowing all of this. So I'm wondering what the difference is in the power of the prayers in Tibetan, especially for those that don't know or can't read any of the Tibetan and just have a vague idea, as opposed to doing it with a complete understanding through having studied and doing the prayers in English. And for someone like me, is it better to do the Lama Chöpa in English, or combine it with the two, or just do it in Tibetan, or what's advice?
So just to repeat back to you, just in brief for the recording, so understanding now the great importance of motivation and my mental engagement to bring about transformation of the mind as well as accumulation of merit. This I can do now based on the knowledge I'm receiving and understanding the words. What about though when prayers or pujas are done in Tibetan and I don't understand the words? So is it better to do it in English or in Tibetan, or if in Tibetan, why and how so?
And now the Yagodo, the Yagore, and Injimiji got Malam de Buhitola, doing Koyasel, Marco, Injiki, 60 Shavena, Carson County, Injication, Injiki, Dondadi, Yago, similar Lord Chagua. The Bugi don't do, and the Bugi machine was that he don't that Lord Chagala, Galahotua. Then is that Imiji Bugetol doing government indicator to Najigore. Chigla Karayungrasene, Jugi Bugi, Yanjik Delia, Pacha Choya, the Mongba, the Chipacha Choya, Susugi, teaches the Decarsene, Lucine, that Bugi, Molam Sikti Mangche, that Lama Zachimbo, the Lama Gerachimo, Horanzuki, 2 million Nashi, and they got to Molam Jepchi Ducine, and the Jig Sunsha Winza, Danzuki, Donda, the Hamona Digi. 6점 직진 숭바나 신직 아주 발로를 파차직이 두스겨 토베네 소설의 소남 첨부차단 바차 차기리 바차 차이가 된다 디리에서 되된거 김사로 시대네시 마도 인지미지다 된거 했어요 말에 배나 저기 땡유다 보이나 규셔는 강들 인지미 산스크리트 직지요래 야가르게도서 직 산스크리트요래 어디 가르세네 Nyama Sangi Jumden Digi Sunyagi Sung Chue Chesan Sanskrit na Sung Haizan Digi Kiegi Sosolia Bacha Shua Di Nubadi Bacha Shua Mahomba Ni Bacha Shua Dandalia and Ni Sanskrit 60 Injimiji Yungore on the Neji Di Zang Manzu Jiki the New Kapla Dead down Mazu di Sanskrit Sikashi Dungri Bukitolia Bichikari Dumbe da Jiyorda Di and Didi the Mado Injimiji di Jik Malam Tori Bukit 가서 된 거야 세제대요 말에.
It's completely fine to do the prayers or the pujas in your own language, right? So in English. There's no compulsion to do it in Tibetan, in particular when one is on one's own. Then when doing your own practice, do it in the language that you will mentally engage with most, because that's how you'll get the most from it. When one comes together, then sometimes it is done, or part of it's done in Tibetan. And so this can be for purposes of harmonics. Maybe it's called a melody, because there's melody in the Tibetan, and there's benefit if one's reciting something with beauty in terms of the mental engagement. And the meaning, if one knows the parts that will be done in Tibetan, one can get familiar with that particular meaning. But also, and bear this in mind, that one benefit that does come from doing the prayers in Tibetan, or the pujas in Tibetan, is that this is the language that all the realized beings in our traditions have studied and recited in and gained their realizations on. So we are connecting with that. So we are creating some imprints and connection. And this has value. And where we as Tibetans do exactly the same is with the Kangyo and Tengyo, the teachings of the Buddha and the sutras and the commentaries from ancient India. The first line of every one is in Sanskrit. And when we recite the title of the text in Sanskrit. For the same reason I've just given you, so as to gain the blessings of the lineage, imprints of the Sanskrit language, which was the language in which all the great masters from India gained their realizations in the sense of that was the language of their texts and they presumably spoke in. So for that same reason, our sutras and shastras start with the first line in Sanskrit. So therefore, the bits that you recite in Tibetan will carry that blessing as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, and sorry, and Gena also said that was a really good question. Thank you for asking. Okay, thank you.